Thank you very much, everyone. Hopefully some of these slides might have been repeated from previous presentations, but it needs to be reinforced. And I've added some new information that we've identified over the last 6 months. So just a little bit of background on myself. I sit on the construction sector group and the construction sector subgroup on innovation and digital adoption, supporting modern medicine construction. And we're also supporting the Housing for All. And there's actions in the Housing for All, Action 61, for enhancing and making the Agreement system more effective. But we're also looking at the roadmap that was published by the Department of Housing and Local Government, and there's actions there as well that we've just completed as well, and we'll share that with you. I have numerous qualifications, experience. I've been on numerous residential projects, commercial, right up to pharmaceutical, Intel, the likes of that, semiconductor facilities, substations, all over UK, Europe and Ireland. So I have a lot of experience, and I want to work with the industry to help support this process, as we said. So there's a lot of issues going on at the moment, and as we're well known, we have a huge housing crisis at the moment, and it's now hitting 14,000. But is modern medicine construction? So there's a lot of thought leadership and a lot of pieces out there. Could modular be the answer to the housing crisis? But you've got to understand the existing regulatory landscape. You've got to understand what's there, what's the frameworks, and how we fit into that. And that's what Simon and Keith had mentioned earlier. So what I want to just do is a quick little overview of what NSAI, because there's still this little uncertainty around standards and certification. They're two separate, distinct things. I just want to give a quick overview of where we are, the key drivers that are pushing towards Agreement at the moment, and then the Agreement process and how we step through that. In terms of NSAI, there's 4 separate divisions within NSAI, and we also have a medical devices division. But in terms of standards and certification, we cannot sit on standards bodies. So for our own conflict of interest and impartiality, we cannot influence standards. So we're very much the referees in the game here. We follow the same standards that the industry, manufacturers, suppliers, designers, specifiers also comply with. We cannot influence standards. We cannot change standards to make it to pass or to make it certify. So that's something to be aware of. We also don't have powers of authority like the building control officers, local authorities have under the building regulations. However, we can withdraw a cert, revoke a cert, or suspend an off-site manufacturer for non-compliance to their Agreement certification. So that's something to be aware of. And if you are suspended, you will have difficulty then in terms of operating or meeting tender requirements or handovers. So that's something to just be aware of. You can all influence standards. You can all sit on the technical committees. There's a TC 150, prefabricated buildings. There's also the timber frame working in construction group are looking at standards and regulations. So we're not just across in the built environment sector, we're across multiple sectors. We're here to support industry, support SMEs, and we actively encourage you to join these standards committees and get involved, because it's you guys that can influence this. And where you feel there is a standard needed, we recommend that you work together in collaboration with each other and then try to come up with that standard. And therefore, then you may not need Agreement certification if there's a standard exists. In terms of just a quick overview of what we're all kind of well familiar with it as an umbrella term. Has numerous names: prefabrication, offsite manufacturing, design for assembly, design for manufacture. Now they're talking about disassembly and reassembly. Like the difficulties we have at the moment in NSCI is trying to get people just to assemble it to the Agreement certification or to the requirements that they've set out. But people are always pushing the boundaries and pushing things, and that's what we want to look at. Our timber trusses, our frames, and then we don't very much focus on the mechanical electrical side, bathroom pods or modular skids. And the reason for that is there's existing CE marking EU directives that cover a lot of mechanical electrical systems, and that's why they've been very successful in the life sciences and the pharmaceutical data center sectors. So, and we also have a sustainability and built environment team, because there's this massive increase now in circular economy, reuse, repurposing materials, but also renewables, and we're trying to move that way. So they're very much focused on those new products and certification around that. So we work together as a team, and that's what we're here for, to help the built environment. As everyone's well aware of the 7 categories, but just to touch upon for those people who are not well aware of it, this stemmed from the UK government. Mark Farmer and the committee there through CAS Consulting worked with government. So rather than us reinventing our own system over here in Ireland, we've now come up with these 7 categories, and this is how it's expanded and started to move forward. in terms of the existing 17 certifications, this is the breakdown at the moment. There's only one 3D volumetric company at the moment. We have numerous applications in for other 3D volumetrics, so they're moving from a 2D panelized system to 3D volumetric. We've 6 ICF offsite manufacturers that are certified, and there is more out there in the market, but they haven't applied yet. There's 1 or 2 in of the application, and then we've other forms of construction. But we're starting to see more and more novel systems. We're starting to see like bifolding systems that are coming into play into the market. So we're open to what type of systems we are, but you've got to understand they vary across the material types and technologies that they're employing. And that's determined by the manufacturers, the designers, and the specifiers. On that side of it, so there's multiple different examples here, and this is just a couple of things down from my flood relief scheme, and we're well aware of all the floods that happened down in Middleton and up in Uri. There's also different styles down in Dundrum Town Centre. They buy steel composite for the lift core systems, were all made off-site. You've got the likes of the Children's Hospital, BAM, made off the flues, were all manufactured off-site and modularised and assembled down on site. And you've got the likes of Modern Homes Ireland that have a 3D volumetric systems, and there's other people out there with volumetric solutions that are coming to market. And then you've got various different ones with like some mechanical electrical system, precast elements that have been around for numerous years. You've a big massive ductwork there that was out in Intel. You've got timber frame construction again, and now you have CLT and grass laminate. So it's quite varies across the different sectors and different material types. And then you've got different 2D panelized systems. You've got bathroom pods, like HDL, ICF. So it's quite varied, and I've no doubt there's going to be a lot more. The difficulty for us is which is going to be the leading technology, which one is going to be front and center, which one is the market going to focus on, or is it a combination of all of these? So you're bringing in a lot of variables into the process and around the certification of that. So what we're trying to do is, and we'll try and share with the market, is there's different rules and regulations under each of these schemes and systems. So there's Eurocodes apply in some cases. Sometimes it's EN 1090 for welded systems. We don't determine that. We ask the manufacturers to assess their product against the requirements that they're going to need. And that's the difficulty. You've got to assess it against the building regulations. You've got to assess it against the European directives. You've got to assess it if there's a British standard. There may be no standard, for example. So if you're doing carbon steel, you might a BS standard might apply. And that's where, and then in some cases there is no standards. So for a light gauge steel system, you might have to go to the Steel Construction Institute in the UK and start working towards that. So the difficulty is people ask us, what should I comply with? What do I need to know? Will you just tell me the 50 requirements I need there, or 50 standards? That's not up for us to determine that. We'll assess it against our criteria and our requirements. But then you've got the likes of 3D concrete printing. We're starting to see end of waste materials coming in, or repurposed materials. So again, they need to be assessed and certified, like what Keith and Simon said earlier on. They've got to be fit for their intended use. And that's what you really have to look at. And then how does it interface, and how do those elements all come together within the building elements? Just a quick on some of the drivers and why Agreement and why now. For us, there's been a lot of great work in the government. There's a lot of policy documents out there. McKinsey wrote a report back in 2019, and they said modular will accelerate where you have a labour shortage and a housing shortage. And you're more than welcome to download those McKinsey reports. They wrote 2 of them in 2019 and 2020. And we're at that tipping point. We're also at a point where it's starting to be specified more and more in e-tenders, and therefore there's a lot of new market entrants coming in here. So the policies and drivers in there, there's a lot of great work that Construct Innovate are doing. You have the demonstration park down in Mount Lucas, it's coming on stream, and there's work going on at the construction sector group. So there's people working on these research and innovation in the background to support the industry in the sector. And this is all in line with the National Development Plan 2040. For us, we sit under Technical Guidance Document Part D that Simon talked about earlier. There's numerous publications that reference modern methods of construction out there. I do recommend you try to source these or try to find them. Hopefully we'll develop a portal where you can start accessing these and make them available. For us, it's the Agreement Guide. It's quite short. It's 40 pages long, but it's really only 20 pages to read. But we find a lot of people that apply to us just haven't read the document. So they're very much speculative, or putting in a speculative application and hoping that we'll come back and assess it. So they fall short, and that's some of the difficulties for us. There's also a lot of work going on in around skills and research and databases around modern methods of construction. So if we start measuring this, we start getting some outputs. For us, we have 4 actions that we've completed in the original Housing for All, and now we have a new action, 61, which is to drive the process improvements and cycle time efficiency. So we're starting to track applications as they come into us, how long they're in with us, when people respond back to us, the turnaround time. So we would typically respond back within a week or 2, but we're finding applicants come back 2 or 3 months later. So they're sitting in the process and they're just churning around there, and they're getting frustrated in the process, but we can't move forward unless they provide the information for us to allow us then to assess the next step of it. As Simon pointed out earlier on, it's under Technical Guidance Document D, and it's been there since 1991. So if you go back to the original Technical Guidance Document 33 years ago, there was reference to Irish Agreement Board and Agreement Certification. So this is not new. It's been in all the Technical Guidance Documents that have appeared here. It is one of the routes to market. The difficulty is the likes of CE marking only covers certain EU directives or certain product groups, and that's difficult. So your product may not fall under that. You can go down the European Technical Assessment route to IOTA, but if you go on their website, it says 9 to 12 months on average, but then when you get more complex building systems, it could take longer. You're more than welcome to that. The difficulty, as Simon pointed out, was you also have to comply with national annexes. So we have unique Irish requirements here that also must be met. And that's difficult for the European offsite manufacturers to have an ETA, but it does help, it does support the process. And then you're down to the likes of IS 440 for timber frame standards, but there may not be a certain standard for other solutions or materials that I've mentioned. And then in terms of Agreement, we're not the sole owners of Agreement. There's nothing stopping another certification body coming into Ireland and running that scheme, but they'd have to understand all the rules and regulations around that, set that up, get it certified, get it accredited, and have the technical people to do that. But that doesn't mean BBA or anyone. The difficulty is under that, you must be from an EEA country. And unfortunately, the UK post-Brexit decided to leave both the single market and the EEA. So they didn't even stay in it. So that makes it difficult. There's 6 different certification schemes under UK. You've got BOPAS, the BRE had a scheme, the Steel Construction Unit, there's a CARE scheme. So the difficulty here is they do help, they do support it, but they don't always meet the building regulations that we're looking for, that the previous speaker spoke about. So for the likes of that, we're looking at the quality assurance scheme. So our scheme is to assess that both in the factory, both on site, both around your workmanship, around your materials, because it's everything. It's the combination of the operational processes. And we want to see the management system or the framework that you develop or design as manufacturer specifiers and how that then complies with the Agreement Cert. And what we're looking for is try not to deviate from the Agreement Cert or try to be clear about your specification and your scope, because you tell us what exactly you want and we then assess against that, against the criteria. So we're looking at various different things from laboratory test results, the calculations, the factory production control, down to the competencies of the staff, the assembly methods. And we find like even the installation manuals, they're very poor, they're very weak. They might be only 5 or 10 pages. Yet when we start talking with the offsite manufacturers and explain to them, we start to see, oh, there's lots more detail. And we say, but you've just explained a really detailed process. You need to document that. So we're looking for the evidence. You can tell us a lot of things, but we need to see the evidence and the verification of that and how it's consistently produced on a scale. And that's what we're looking for. In terms of then, at the moment, as I said, there's 17 clients, but some have multiple certifications. And then since I've come on board in June, we've seen a 71% increase in applications. I now have 54 clients in the agreement process at the moment, all with various different solutions and technologies. And you can see there the likes of Leiden Design, Framespace have applied, local down in Roscommon and Longford. They've moved from a 2D and they have a 3D volumetric solution now coming in with us. We've the likes of Vision Build, but then we have a lot of overseas applications. So we're open to every application and we'll assess them on their merits. But what happens is we need you to be prepared when you come into the process and be ready for it. At the moment, we keep a dashboard of all the metrics, and there is what's people find very surprising. It is over 173 offsite manufacturers here in Ireland with a fixed location on the island of Ireland, not in some factory in Poland or the UK or Netherlands or anything like that. They have a fixed presence here. They're not all in housing. They could be in data centers, they could be in educational, they could be in aviation sectors, whatever. They focus on their niche markets and that's where they operate. Doesn't mean they can't operate in any other markets, but even last week, I got another 2 applications. Never heard of the 2 companies applied. One was from Northern Ireland and one was over in Spiddal in west of Galway. That just shows you, I just add them onto the database and then we assess them. So there's a different maturity level. We're starting to see a maturity level as the market evolves and grows. And then we're here to support them. We've also been speaking with the Department of Education and they're also looking at agreement certification for their framework contractors. So that's where it's going. And then as you can see, I start to have a lot of international applications. So this is good, this is okay, but you've got to understand the scheme and the framework that we're operating in. In terms of then the agreement steps and the services that we're now providing to enhance that in line with Action 61, We're also providing a pre-approval stage. So if you're a new market entrant or you're not sure of, we'll do an initial gap analysis or assessment for you to see whether you're suitable. I don't want you coming into this process, getting frustrated, paying a lot of money and having to churn around and get all the documentation. So we'll do an assessment initially with you. We'll offer that for you. And if you're successful at that and you meet the criteria, you're more than welcome to come into the Agrément certification process. But we find that works best because companies are not prepared or well organized. Once you're in the Agrément certification, we'll assess it and we'll process it. We are struggling with some applications. They're incomplete, they're lacking information, or they say to follow. It's very difficult for us to assess it if we're waiting on the information and they have to follow, or they have to go off and get further testing in a laboratory or whatever. And then we're also in support of the assigned certifiers and design certifiers. Will provide ancillary certification. We can't act as the assigned certifier, design certifier. You can't have two of them in the same thing. We're not the building certifier because we're not manufacturing. And then if you look at SD, SI, SC, we're not the designer, we're not the completion of the modules, but we can provide some inspection. Now, how does that sit when you have two SIs? We have one, and then the offsite. So the offsite manufacturers or the assemblers should have their own inspection and quality control process in place. We can support that through audits, inspections, and going to site. We're doing that for 2 clients at the moment, and it seems to be working, and we're providing some advice. But again, we're only providing what we recommend, and we demonstrate where we're showing compliance. But it increases the level of inspection and support, both on an on-site and off-site capacity. And then in support of the recent BIM mandate from the Office of Government Procurement, we'll be providing ISO 19650 certification for companies that want to do that. That's for public sector projects, and that's come into effect in this month, and there's a 5-year period. So every project in the next 5 years under €1 million will have to have BIM certification. So we're trying to respond to the market and what's needed. For us, you've got to look at the gaps. We keep saying to you, it's your system, it's your processes, it's your intended use, it's your purpose groups, it's your environment, your sectors. Please assess it against those requirements before you come into us. Complete the application form online. We'll then assess it. There's a fee, it's non-refundable, and then we'll start the process with you in the application. But do read the Agrément guide. It gives you guidance of what we're looking for. We'll then take an initial assessment. The difficulty I'm having is I'm sending back about 45 to 70 questions in relation to the applications. They make statements on it in a document or a manual or a thing, and then I start asking questions around it. I find in some of the documents there's out-of-date standards reference in it. So I have to go back and get clarification. Did you mean this standard or did you refer to this standard? Geez, I'm not sure. I was written by someone else. I'll have to go and check. So it starts getting into back. But we'll give you a very detailed assessment. We'll send it back to you to get the ball rolling. We'll have a kick-off meeting as well with the offsite manufacturers, and then we'll start going into the technical assessment specification. That gets into the real detail of everything, because we're looking at every component, every interface, every assembly, and this is where people start saying, well, I'm not sure now, am I going to get the whole lot certified? I need to review the scope. So what we say is be very clear about the scope that you're going to submit into us, because we don't want to spend 2 or 3 months with you and then you've realized that actually you can't meet that requirement, so actually you want to de-scope it. Then we're kind of resetting the clock and we're going back again. So it's just going to take longer. Start gathering all your documentation, your supporting evidence, and produce that. Some of these packs we're getting are over 1,000 pages of information. We don't mind, we'll welcome it, we'll go through the whole lot. But just go through it yourselves, make sure it lines. It's sometimes written by various different people in the organization, and they haven't talked to the quality manager, hasn't talked to the engineer, hasn't talked to the operations director, and they're saying 3 different things in the one document. So just be careful, make sure it's a collaborative, like you're submitting any tender or any bid, make sure it's coherent, it's all aligned, or you're submitting a commencement notice, make sure it's all fit for its intended use. And then we'll submit the results, and once you're in, then your certificate is valid for 5 years. But the different areas we're looking at is we're looking at durability, we're looking at structure, air tightness, thermal bridging, we're looking at connection details, maintenance and use, we're looking at your assembly. There's a huge variations and variables that we're looking at across the process. And then we're looking for the evidence behind that, the competencies of the staff, we're looking at the QA/QC checklists, we're looking at all testing, even the packaging, the handling, the storage. So you can do a wonderful module, make it perfect in the factory, and then you leave it out in the rain, or it's exposed to the elements, or it's being knocked around on site. It damages, it compromises the product. These are big building systems. We've seen what's happened with Boeing. We've seen where the checks weren't done, the door fell off, and now Ryanair are having to do additional checks now on the Boeing. But unfortunately, they're the only 2 manufacturers that are certified to manufacture planes, Boeing and Airbus. But there's a lot more manufacturers out here, and you need to make sure those checks and balances are done, and how you demonstrate and how you can ensure consistency of the product that's being made. In terms of just oversights and what we've picked up at the moment, we've completed all our surveillance audits for last year. But what we're discovering in that process is not many have management systems. So of the few, there's only 8 that have ISO 9001, and of the few, they have EN, or they might have EN 1090 or both. Some of them have environmental certifications and some have the health and safety. So again, it's quite interesting to see the companies that perform well in the audits and inspections actually have robust systems in place. So we encourage you to go off and get that certification. You don't have to get it with NSAI, you can get it with one of the other INAB accredited certification bodies for these certifications. But we find that it definitely helps support their process and they have a deeper understanding of their operational end-to-end processes. In terms of the audit findings for major and minor at the moment from those audits, we have 71% of recommendations. It's based on a Pareto analysis. I'm not surprised by the results, 80-20 rule or the 70-30 rule. But we are finding some percentages of major non-compliance. In some cases, there's no paperwork to back up the evidence. So for us, it's a lack of documentation that we're finding within the factories. Excellent people, excellent tradesmen, doing all the right stuff, but there's no checks. And then when we ask them, where did you get that from? Well, I don't know, I'll have to check and I have to follow up. And there's just, so the support behind that is where it's lacking at the moment for us. For us, the top 10 items that we're discovering over the last 6 months is manufacturers, designers, specialists not reading or understanding the hierarchy of EU documents. You need to understand, does your product fall under an EU directive, a harmonized standard, CE marking, and not everything is harmonized, an EN standard, an Irish standard, or in the absence of that, a British standard or an alternative. Then you also have to see how that fits into TGDs and how that aligns. And then you suddenly step into a new sector and there might be additional regulatory requirements set out by the bodies, in this case, the Department of Education. They have other TGDs or specifications that need to be met. So as you move through the sectors, you inherit other responsibilities and liabilities, and that's not captured. We're finding there's not enough detail or lacking evidence or missing some test records or out-of-date information. Sometimes people suspend or pause the application. We have some that are sitting there from October, we follow up them on a quarterly basis, we don't hear anything back. So we presume they don't need the argument, and then we hear back, actually urgent, I'm on site, can I get it in the next 6 to 12 weeks? I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. So what we say is, if you're in the application process, be active in it, have the team around you, support yourself, and start actually working towards it. And we're here to help you. We're here to get through it. They don't understand or read the argument guide. That's a difficulty. It's not a big document. We're going to create some infographics to try and support the industry if one page is going to help, but you still have the devil's in the detail, as the guy said. And sometimes we're trying to establish the legal entity of the firms. So we have a company that's owned by an American, has a design firm in Ireland, has an offsite manufacturer in the UK, with other 2 offsites in Poland. And we're even trying to just understand the relationship of who's responsible, who's in charge, who's liable, what's the parties in the contract. And then they go, actually, we have another company that's over in another. Oh, right, so are you using that factory? Well, we're not sure, we're thinking about it. So if you're not even sure around your own supply chain or how it's all linked to link, that provides difficulties, because we can't start assessing, because we need to know where the people are and where the factories are. We get a lot of speculative inquiries, particularly from outside Ireland, with again, very lack of understanding, not understanding Irish rules. It's no different if I was going to another European country or I was going to Australia or America. I'd have to understand the rules and regulations in those jurisdictions. There is unique requirements here in Ireland, and that's for very obvious reasons. Climatic conditions, the weather, you know, the different environments that we operate here, no different to any European districts. That's difficult because building regulations aren't the same across Europe. We find that they do not demonstrate compliance. They start off really well with their documents. It starts with technical guidance, document A, B, C, and as they work through it, it just starts fading away, and I start getting the to follow, soon, not sure, we'll come back to you. You're kind of, it's not really, I can't move forward much with that. They always ask me, who do I recommend the consultants? We can't consult and advise. I recommend the professional bodies step in here, and there's opportunities here for you because we're getting numerous inquiries around that. So there's a whole support required in this process. I definitely recommend it for companies to set up and specialize in this area. Lack of CE marking, I get DOPs. They're either out of date, they're wrong EU directives, or they're not the essential characteristics are not fit for its intended use. So you need to look at the DOP, see what it says, and see when it's valid, see if it even complies with the current EU directive. I have some that are way out of date. And then a lot around mechanical electrical services, and even around the maintenance and use, there's a lot of lacking information around that. So these are the type of things that we're picking up. We'll happily share them out, and we'll keep rolling the top 10 every time, and we'll start doing analysis on these and which are the top 10 coming out. So for us, it's very much about getting the inputs right. You know your activities, you know your assembly methods, your fabrication routes and what you do. You have your own checkpoints and balances around that. And then we want to see the outputs of that. So for us to generate a certificate, we need to see the inputs. and how those activities function and interact. And then we can generate a certificate off the back of that to support this. We're looking at the likes of around design, construction method erections, maintenance records, on-site inspections, checks. We find that the workmanship is done by a different person. So the factory assembles it, but the on-site assembly is completely different. And then what the guy said earlier, are they trained to undertake that work? Have they been shown to it? So it might be made in Poland, but there's an Irish contractor assembling it. But is the Irish contractor aware of the methods or the correct sequence of operating it? This is not IKEA. This is not just follow the instruction manual. In some cases, there is no manual that they're following. So you'll end up having a wonderful product, but then it's undermined by the assembly methods on site, or it's compromised because of something's been missed in the process. So that's key and critical. We want to see that. We want to see the factory production control. We want to see the traceability. We want to see the records. We want to see the inspection. We want to see the final release and how the product is controlled and maintained. And then we want to see the operational processes, because effectively this is a manufacturing process, and we want to see end-to-end the quality control inspections and who's responsible. It's the person who's closest to the action, the person who's closest to the assembly. It's the people assembly. It's at the point of connection where things will fail. And we want to know who controls it. It's not the operating director or somebody in the back office, but it's the people who procure, it's the production personnel, it's the supervisors. It's those guys on the ground that are making things happen with the tradespeople and making sure that's right. And it's employing and it's putting the customer at the front and center of all this. And then in terms of people always ask me to wrap up is, how long does it take to get through Agrément? Well, we'd love it to be as short as possible. We're working on that. It's currently taking 15 to 21 months for a lot of applicants, but that's for various reasons that I outlined. We get things where we send an applicant, we reply back to them, we don't hear anything for 3 or 4 weeks. There was one company I was chasing for 3 months. I emailed the directors, the mails didn't bounce back. I rang reception, left a message. I was only short of flying over to the factory and saying I'm here. And then this lady rings me up from the design team and says, how's my application getting on? I said, well, I've been trying to contact you. Oh, apologies about that. So it's very difficult for us to move if people don't come back or reply. So once you get into the technical assessment, that's where the real detail starts happening. That's where the rubber hits the road for us. And then we'll work on the other processes. But we are focused on this cycle time. We are tracking, we're measuring every offsite manufacturer through this process and how long it's taking. And this time next year, we'll come back with clear metrics of exactly who's getting through the process quicker and who's not. And that's where the benchmark starts coming in. So what gets measured gets done, and that's what we're here to support you that. And then you're valid then for the 5 years with the certification. We're carrying out numerous stakeholder engagements, meeting with numerous people along the day. We've completed all our surveillance audits. We'll be doing unannounced inspections next year. We'll be doing on-site inspections. We'll be doing off-site. So do watch that we will be coming and we'll be looking at the certificates and we'll be starting asking questions. So make sure you're ready for us. We're telling you now, we'll have some planned, we'll have some unannounced, which we are entitled to do. But for us, there's lots of challenges. It's the size of the market. I know how big the Irish market is. I know there's demand for the tenders. I don't know how many overseas applications are going to come. So the IDA and Enterprise Ireland are doing some great work and bringing in some new applicants. But how many of them are there? Is there 1,000 out there? Is there 50, 100? The level of inquiries is, I'm literally getting every day, I get an inquiry about MMC. So we're going to start developing some frequently asked questions. I get 2 new applicants every 2 weeks, and I get brand new, as I said, I add 2 new companies nearly on every 2 week basis, and I have a new contract with it every month. So this is only growing, this is only accelerating, which is natural by the market. We have a small team, and thank you to DETI and Department of Housing, we've now got additional funding for more resources, which we'll be scaling up. And then we're also going to increase the level of inspections and oversight, so do be aware of it. But for us, it's around the understanding and focusing in on the application process. If you can get it right at the front end, it'll be a lot easier coming out of the back end for us, if that makes sense. And look, there's opportunities for everyone here, and for us, it's to increase the industry standards and the knowledge and experience, which is what this event is about today. So we're here to support that and drive forward. So happy to take any questions or anything after that. Thank you.